A major water main that supplies 60% of Calgary's water supply is still not fixed after the main began leaking last week. This is no small water main. The break occurred in what's considered to be one of the city's main arteries, taking water from the treatment facility in the north to 23 reservoirs across the city of Calgary. The main is so big that you can drive a vehicle through it. On Sunday, Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek was forced to apologize for the city's poor communication regarding the water crisis. But what the mayor has said in recent days hasn't reassured me one bit. We pay record amounts in property taxes, and yet basic city infrastructure is falling apart. Anyone paying attention is beginning to wonder, where's all our money going? I'm Rachel Emmanuel, and this is the Alberta Roundup.
Rachel Emmanuel brings the news each day. On Alberta Roundup, she has her say.
Okay, everyone, before we get started here, some of you will notice that I am recording in a different location. Some of you have complained repeatedly under the comment section about the white wall that I typically use, saying that it is very hard on the eyes when you're watching the show on your TV. So I thought I would try something different for a little while. Let me know if you prefer the new background color or if you would prefer that I go back to the old white that I've been using for some time now. Okay, everyone, let's start by diving into the details and looking into what happened last week, Wednesday, when the pipe burst. That was 8 days ago now. The pipe is officially known as the Bear Spa South Feeder Main, and officials are still unsure what caused the break. In fact, Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek has said that the pipe was in good condition and had some maintenance work done to add technology, such as air valves, to ensure its future performance. She also said that the pipe has a 100-year lifespan and is only 50 years into that lifespan, so about halfway of what we should have expected of its performance. So I think at this point we have more questions than answers as to what went wrong last week. As I mentioned before, the pipe is actually big enough to drive a vehicle through. Those of you who are watching this podcast on video format, which I believe most of you do, are able to get a good look right now as to exactly how big this water main was. As I mentioned before, big enough to drive a vehicle through. This thing is absolutely massive, which is part of the reason it's taking crews so long to dig down, figure out where the pipe had broken, and then begin getting that piece out of the ground so that it could be replaced. The Broker Feederman is in Bonus, which is a community in Calgary's northwest, very close to where I live. And that community has been under a boil water advisory until Monday. Officials are also warning Calgarians that if they don't continue to cut down on their water use, the city runs the risk of running out of treated water. Officials suggested reducing shower times by a few minutes, skipping a few flushes of the toilet, or holding off on doing laundry for the time being. Stage 4 outdoor watering restrictions are in place, meaning you can't water plants, your lawn, or use tap water for any other purposes outside. Businesses are also being asked to stop all non-essential water uses, which includes construction, exterior window cleaning, pesticide application, and washing surfaces. Now, Calgary estimated last week that it would take 5 to 7 days to fix the pipeline, but officials still don't have an exact timeline, and it's been a week. Take a listen.
We're building out the timeline for what this looks like once we get the new pipe in, and then we've got to start filling the pipe and get everything back in service.
Now that we know exactly what has gone wrong, even though we don't have an answer to the biggest question, why the pipe burst in the first place, let's take a look at what Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek has been saying. After her initial apology on Sunday, Gondek has been holding more briefings throughout the week. The city has been doing about 2 press conferences a day to update Calgarians on the water crisis. Here's Gondek giving an update at her Tuesday briefing.
We might have the feeder main repaired in 5 to 7 days. Following that, it still needs to be flushed and the water will need to be tested. That means several more days of all of us being low water users.
Now, the mayor has been appearing in press briefings more often to reassure Calgarians and to give them clear information on the situation. And I didn't see much media coverage of what she said next in this briefing, but it was actually a chilling revelation to those of us paying attention. Take a listen.
Yesterday morning, we also learned of a small water main break in Boness, which impacted 21 households. And while we know that water main breaks happen to the tune of about 200 a year in the city, it was still another blow to our neighbors in Boness.
In this press conference, the mayor drops that there's been another water break in the poor community of Boness who's just taken an absolute beating. She sort of covered this by saying, there's about 200 of these and it was unrelated to the initial incident. That does not make me feel better. The fact that it was unrelated to the initial water break does not give me confidence in this whatsoever. Now, for those of you who are feeling uneasy, next the mayor says that access to the feeder main, which is currently being fixed, also needs to be repaired. Take a listen.
Now, while the crews are in the ground, they're also repairing an access point to that feeder main.
Anyone with two brain cells to rub together at this point is beginning to understand that Calgary's water supply system is in a very fragile state. And then the mayor goes on CTV News and she isn't able to say whether or not she has confidence that this was a one-off incident. Take a listen to that.
Any concerns that it may fail somewhere else as well, or does it look like this might have just been a one-off in that one spot?
So the water team does regular checks. There was maintenance done on this line, routine maintenance in April of this year. So the good news scenario is that all the parts and the equipment that we need to do the repair are available to us. They're just waiting to go into the ground once the assessment is done. You know what? We do regular maintenance on a lot of our infrastructure, and we do a review of the infrastructure on a regular basis to see how it's doing.
Instead of going ahead and agreeing with the host and reassuring Calgarians that yes, this incident was a one-off, Gondek goes ahead and says that there was regular maintenance being done on this major feed main, which personally makes me feel even worse. So we apparently are already taking regular looks at this line to make sure that issues don't arise, and yet the biggest water leak in the city's history, probably even the province's history, occurs under this mayor's watch. So just to sum up, there's been a break in a major water feed that officials still don't know when is going to be fixed. While that was happening in the city of Bowness, there was also another break in a water main in the city of Bowness, a smaller one unrelated to the first incident, as if that's supposed to reassure us somehow that things are running very smoothly over at the city of Calgary. Then, an access point to the major water feed also needed to be fixed so that officials could get down and fix this issue in the first place. And while all of this is going on, the mayor of Calgary is not able to come out and say that this incident was a one-off. Instead, she tries to reassure us by saying that regular maintenance was being done on this. If regular maintenance was being done on this, how did this incident happen in the first place? You think this is something officials would have been able to catch before it turned into the massive citywide crisis that is happening right now. So much so to the point that you are all being asked to stop showering, and you're not able to water your lawns or even flush your toilets. It's even worse if you're living in Bowness, where you weren't able to access safe drinking water unless you were able to drive to one of the vans that was supplying it. Now, I know you all were thinking this Calgary hellscape couldn't get any worse, but you would be wrong. Because of course, there are still many Canadians who are all too eager to return to the COVID era of rules and telling on your neighbors, which is exactly what some Calgarians have resorted to doing when they felt their neighbors weren't doing an adequate job of consuming water. Take a look at this clip from a Calgary official this week.
While most Calgarians are doing their best and following water restrictions, we have been attending to some people who have not. Since June 6th, we've dealt with a number of incidences of people misusing water. We've issued 993 notices and resolved 934 calls. Of those resolved, we've had 249 written warnings, 321 verbal warnings, and we have issued the same one ticket. While there is room for improvement, we're encouraged by the far greater number of Calgarians that are complying with the water restrictions, especially during Calgary's short growing season.
Now, just because I know how things are so easily manipulated and flipped on the internet, I'm not taking this as a call not to follow the stage 4 restrictions. You can make that decision for yourself. You can look at the information that's being provided and decide if you want to follow these rules or not, and if you want to risk the fine or not. If I was living in Calgary, I probably would be able to follow the rules fairly quickly, considering that I didn't have a lawn and I had no outside plants to water anyways, so I doubt I would be very impacted by these restrictions to begin with. That said, I also wouldn't be the type of person to stand at my window taking notes of people who I didn't feel were doing an adequate job of following the city restrictions and calling and telling of them. And I suspect most of you aren't those types of people either. Now, I'm not the first person to observe this nightmare, and I won't be the last. So now let's take a look at some of the comments that were left under Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek's press briefings this week. This first comment is from Zinquips. How many tickets have been issued to the city for misusing water? Since the flood in 2013, millions of municipal dollars have been spent on improving water management. Apparently, the solution was enrich their friends associated with construction companies and leave a city with 1.3 million people with a water supply that is reliant on one downstream pipe that was installed in the 1950s. When it broke, nobody can provide an explanation or why there is zero redundancy. Now our mayor is suggesting that we shower with a bucket. That's a great metaphor. These City Hall grifters must catch millions in their grift buckets. I think this comment raises a lot of important questions that I myself am raising about why are we paying so much in city property taxes when this is the type of service we're getting? We don't even have basic needs like water being delivered to us. And obviously this is a provincial government priority, but we saw the same thing in the winter in January when we had that cold spike. We had one cold spike this January in what was otherwise a relatively warm winter. And already we were being warned that if we didn't conserve our electricity use, we would be facing rolling brownouts. So for those of us living in Alberta, we're probably looking around right now wondering what is going on at the various levels of government that it has become such a difficulty to provide us with basic services like water or electricity. Seems like every time things get a little bit tough, weather's a little colder than it usually is, all of a sudden we're being in a position where we're being warned, you might have to keep your lights off for a couple hours. And if you don't do that, then we're not going to have any electricity to provide to you to heat your homes. As for the city of Calgary, they just raised property taxes this year. And then they turn around and deliver this type of service to us. As many of you know, I'm in Ontario at the moment visiting family. I'm sort of torn because I feel like I missed out on a big news story. It's actually a story that has national interest, I think, just because it is a massive disaster and such mismanagement of city water and mismanagement even of a crisis and how poorly they've began communicating things. So I'm torn. In one sense, I like to be on the ground to report things. In another sense, I'm very glad and very relieved I don't have to deal with the irritation of water restrictions. I have a young baby. I've just started feeding him solids. As any of you parents out there know, it is an absolute nightmare when you start giving your baby solids for the first time. Food everywhere. So, we've been giving him a couple more baths than usual, so that would have been a bit of an irritation if now I felt like I had to conserve water or risk running out. So, I guess at the end of the day, I would say I'm pretty relieved not to be there. But watching this all happen from afar makes me think, do I even want to live in Calgary? Do I want to live in a city where they continually raise property taxes and are unable to deliver basic services like water? The answer is probably not. I kind of suspect we won't want to live within the actual boundaries of city because I just can't fathom being governed by a city council and city officials that are this incompetent at doing their jobs. Paying that much in property taxes and then struggling to have things like water delivered to your home. It just doesn't seem worth it to me. Let's keep taking a look at some of these comments. User Sapala said, better to issue tickets now after days of warnings because until actual tickets issued, people will keep doing it knowing no real tickets are issued. So this is pretty much a pretty common attitude of people that we see on the left. Let's ticket our neighbors for things like watering their garden. I don't know what these instances were, but I'm just saying I hate this kind of stuff. It's so unbelievably petty. I think Dr. Jordan Peterson put it best, petty tyrants. Whenever incidents like these arise, we see all of the petty tyrants come out of the woodwork, so eager to tell on their neighbors and have a little bit of, maybe feeling of power from that. And this is the type of behavior that you run into a lot in the city. So again, I'm thinking might be best to move out of the city, have a little more privacy from your neighbors, have a little more land. I'm just so tired of the types of people that have really shown their true colors since COVID and are always looking for an excuse to basically tell on each other. Okay, and this comment I just had to throw in there because it made me laugh. Truthfully, I just thought this was funny. I have a very immature sense of humor. User Titus Maximus said, I've been drinking my pee. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm very immature, you guys. I thought that was hilarious. All right, so that wraps up today's show. Question of the week for you all. How many of you are conserving your water use in Calgary, and what do you think caused the break in this major water feed? What do you think? All right, everyone, that's all we have time for today. As always, I will be back on Saturday with my regular programming. Please like this video and subscribe to True North so you don't miss any of our content. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you on Saturday. God bless.